Well, it's the 17th day of the month of August 2018. From wherever you're watching, thanks for joining us for the Media Roundtable. You notice I don't have a smile on my face as I used to, as I always have. But hey, guess what? It's time for us to talk what happened throughout the whole week today. And we give you some sort of analysis and thoughts and putting some flesh to the bones, the top stories this week. And we are going to be discussing what happened in Arua. And then later on, we'll be talking about what happened at the court martial. And also throw some light, or one or two, on the treason charges and the force that is coming up to free Bobi Wine. All right, my name is Solomon Serwanja. Let me just start by introducing my team this morning. I'll start with Kenneth Lukwago, our guest this morning. Kenneth, it's good to have you, man.
It's good to be here, Solomon.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure hosting you. Kenneth Lukwago is a senior journalist. I think I should add that for all purposes of honesty. He works with Radio Akabozi and Radio 1, and also one of the people who have seen growing up in the industry. It's good to have you, man. Joseph Sabiti, man from Zombo, and journalist, and a person who covered closely what happened in Arua. We are looking forward to mining more information from you as to what really happened. You clearly are in a low mood, but good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, Mr. Anjala, Simon Kagwa Anjala.
You've killed my mood. I've never seen you this hopeless.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Njala Simon is the host of the Morning Breeze show, but also always a permanent panelist on the Media Roundtable. It's good to have you on the show. From the historic and philanthropic, I don't know. All right, Mr. Kasumba, it's good to have you on the show.
Yeah. You seem to be in a mood to cause people problems.
And I'm about to.
Walking on eggshells.
Good to have you on the show, Mildred. Mildred is a senior journalist also and works with NBS Television. My name is Solomon Serwanja once again. All right, let's get the show started with what happened in Arua. All roads and all eyes were on Arua. Ladies and gentlemen, Kassiano Wadri, emerging winner in these polls. Nusra Tuperu coming through second, and what really has Ejiku was third, and then we had Bruce Musema the fourth. But let's start with looking at what really happened. I want to bring in Joseph Sabiti. Joseph, you were on ground. Give us your general assessment and view on this issue.
I think that the better part of the campaigns were very, very peaceful. I witnessed scenarios where, for example, supporters of Kassiano Wadri and Tuperu would crisscross, and they would pass each other. You wouldn't notice a lot of major incidences of violence and things like that. For example, at Mvara, the rally of Kassiano and the FDC candidate was in very close proximity. I saw Dr. Besigye's convoy drive through the Wadri Kassiano supporters. Drive through, flashing the V sign, people cheering him up, but shouting Wadri, Wadri, and they progressed. And so a lot of those things happened until the final day when the big shots came into the town, and the president was at Arua Hill Grounds, Kassiano Wadri was at prison, and Dr. Besigye and team were at the extreme end, Arua Primary School. So I think that's the day when everything absolutely went extremely wrong. The position of the state is that the presidential motorcade was stoned. The presidential motorcade was stoned. And the entire rear's windscreen was broken. That's the position of the state. The position of the Wadri Kassiano team is that it's stage managed. Because if you listen to the president, he was in studio. You listen to the president campaigning in Arua just before that incident. He spent about half the time on the podium speaking about Wadri Kassiano. And Samson knows, and everybody who watched that broadcast knows the language he used to refer to him, what he called him. And he warned the people of Arua that should they risk bringing him back, then they should forget anything. He says he refused to grant Terego a district status because of Wadri. So a lot of those things. So the things that happened before that confrontation, I think, somehow handed. From our assessment on the ground, from the time we went in, it was obvious Kassiano was the man to beat. But the operations, the security operations and everything handed the victory, made it easy. They made it very easy for him to win the race from jail.
Okay, so you saw it coming, especially after what happened.
After what happened, there was no way the Honorable Kassiano Wadri was going to lose that election. He was already a strong candidate. But after the operations of security, I'm sure we'll be discussing a bit more of the details later. After that operation, there was no way the NRM would win that election.
All right, let me bring in Mildred to high say on this issue. Mildred, you've been talking to a number of people during the whole week. Did you see Kassiano's victory coming, or it was a surprise?
It wasn't a surprise to me. Like Joseph says, Kassiano was already a very strong candidate, a candidate who is backed up by this coalition that has caused the reality of a win in by-elections, for example, because we've only tested it on by-elections and not in the general election so far. That is the people power, our power. We know the kind of operations they had in Bujiri and the other people they've decided to support, even when it was Ginger East, when this very coalition, before it became bigger, was still supporting and under the opposition. So like Joseph said, right after the operations that did happen and the arrests, there was something that was very likely that has happened in many political events and elections, and that is the sympathy vote and the protest vote. Those are two votes that could definitely come out, like Joseph says, after that election. The sympathy and the protest of, okay, you've done this, we can show you that we can be able to do contrary to what you are saying. And then the whole sympathy that comes with, why does he have to be, he didn't even get time to elect himself. Like Joseph was saying that particular day, for Kassiano Wadri to be able to vote, given the fact that he had been transferred to Gulu, he needed to have been released between 11 and midday for him to drive 3 hours to get to Arua. That didn't come. What do you expect? And NRM itself at a point in time, I do remember, I think it was in Bujiri, and the spokesperson was still talking about the protest vote, because they clearly know, partly in some of these elections, NRM has received a protest vote, and it has gone in favor of another candidate and not their own.
And I agree with you. I mean, if you see, for example, if you remember the burial of former Arua municipality member of parliament, you know, Abiriga, the president was very candid on Wadri, said, this man, I fought with him 15 years, you know, so it sort of brought out
what I've always hated Wadri. How come I never killed him?
All right, let me bring you in, Simon. If you saw Bobi Wine, he was a bit hesitant on throwing his weight behind Wadri. And if you read his letter that has been online, I can't verify it, he said it took him time. That's why he came on in the last days, you know, to drum up support for Wadri, because he wanted some sort of unity. But this failed. Do you think that Bobi Wine's decision to throw his back on Wadri also played a critical role in his victory?
Oh yes, certainly. We look now at Bobi Wine as the new tide that is sweeping across the political divide, and you can never underestimate Bobi Wine. You can never. Our sentiments aside, Bobi is a strong personality, and the high and low of what he's going through, we pray for his quick recovery and everything, but that marks the beginning of a political furnace that he's going to go through, which is typical of the politics of this country. Politics that is defined by blood.
We'll get a little bit there, but do you think his factor played a critical role in
Significantly. You can never underestimate Bobi Wine, because he's a magnet in himself. He is a magnet. He pulls, he sways the youth vote and the undecided. Today, he's the new spice that is going to, you know, boost numbers, bring hope to the undecided.
Yeah, all right. Let me bring in Kenneth Lukwago. Kenneth, you report from Parliament. You clearly know the legislative process, and you can sort of look at Wadri's tenure in parliament before he was dropped from Terego. He bounces back right now as member of parliament for Arua municipality. And what do you think played out for him in this election?
First of all, like you stated, I think the battles between President Museveni and Kassiano Wadri trace back to Parliament when Kassiano Wadri was the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. There was that time when there was an investigation. I cannot clearly remember what it was about. And there was this pull here and there about whether the committee needed to interface with the president. And this was the first time that the committee was taking this kind of step. And the letters were exchanging from State House and saying, look, this will be demeaning to have the president respond to some of these issues. Not until it was decided that the committee should interface with the president. And the exchange between Wadri and the president, the information that I got from the people that attended that particular meeting at the State Lodge in Nakasero was really interesting because there's this tendency of the president writing letters in which he issues directives, and at the end of the day, when public resources are utilized based on his directive, then there is this argument that public officials needed to interpret the letter of the president and implement it within the law. And so the public officials should be the ones to be paying for the mistakes that occurred. But Wadri was of the view that the buck would stop with the president because he's the one who actually would write these letters. But that aside, I think also the NRM fronted a very weak candidate, a candidate who has lost, is it twice? In a rural-based election. And here you are, you're trying to bring that kind of a candidate in a municipality. And in a period when we have just had the post-Tojikwatako situation where people have actually sort of opened their eyes, and this wave that we are talking about of Bobi Wine, not as an individual, but what he stands for. There are people who actually think that most people are being pulled towards Bobi Wine because of the music, but the message he cuts across, he sort of provides what has been missing from the old guard, the people I would choose to call the old guard. You see, that message that goes beyond the removal of President Museveni alone, So I think he manages to mobilize that particular support. I also like his strategy of moving door to door. You saw what he did in Bujiri, and I'm aware that that's exactly what happened in Arua, reaching out to people, understanding their issues. So I think that plus the infighting in the NRM camp, we also, one of the independents was crying live on TV, how he was cheated in, the primaries, and how he was being cheated in the election, and even the letters of the president, the latest letter of the president about that particular issue, he talks about the egoism in the NRM camp. So you can clearly see that everything was in favor of Kassiano Wadri, who happens to have been tested as an MP. And
actually, yesterday, Kasule Lumumba came out to say it is this division within the NRM that cost us, because when she added Nusrat Tupero's votes plus the other independents who came from the NRM,
sure,
it came to about 9,000. So she thought that they would have won the elections. But let me bring in Samson Kasumba from Kenneth Lukwago, NRM fronted a weak candidate. From Joseph, the Bobi Wine factor
because
played out.
Because the margin between the winner and the second runner-up was bigger than the votes that Nusrat Tuperu got.
Whoa. So what do you think played out in the Arua by-election?
I think for me, having been in constant contact on air and off it with my senior professional colleague, Joseph Sabiti, I think one of the biggest moments of that election was that emotional scenario of, I think it was Ejiku crying.
No,
Atima, frantically crying. And I think as the man cries, then what happens next? The Deputy Secretary General of the NRM agreeing with him that this comes off a back of a messy primary. And he says, yeah, he's right. There are things we didn't do. Now, how do you as a party know that you have had a messy primary, there are things you haven't sorted, and you still go into an election, and you think it is okay? And also, depending on who you talk to, it could be rumors, we had, again, guns were drawn. So there's a lot going on. This is a party that is dealing with serial losses in parliamentary by-elections. It's long since they won one, and I think they are going to struggle to win one. So there is that. Then again, their candidate, who God rest his soul in peace, Abiriga, before he was killed, this was a man Joseph Sabiti interviewed, and he was bitter that he was trying to see Mzee, the same Mzee we are talking about, and no one was allowing him to see Mzee. And then there were functions arranged in his area, and he was sidelined. Before that is solved by the NRM, the unfortunate happens, he dies. And during the events that happened after that, you saw Arua was bitter. Chairs were broken. You saw that nasty incident. Arua was so bitter, the president couldn't go through town. He had to go around town. That tells you there are problems. So before even those are sorted, there is an election. Meaning there is a lot that hasn't been dealt with. There is an election. And then the president is already fighting a candidate, and then the candidate comes in. So there is the NRM issue. There are internal conflicts within the opposition. There is the Bobi Wine factor, who you can now... You see, there was a day when if you were entering politics and you wanted to win, you had to go and sit around Kasangati and do everything you can to see Dr. Kizza Besigye. Apparently now, you may not need to see him. You need to bench Bobi Wine and do everything to get Bobi Wine coming. I'll take you back to a morning show that he hosted after Asuman Basaria had won Bujiri. He was hosted here, and I think it was you who hosted him. And he asked him about Bobi Wine. After taking a sigh, Asuman Basaria sat in his seat and took a big sigh and said, look, the young people in this country believe that we are the problem. Now, Asuman is 39. He said they think we are the problem, and they think whether you take it or leave it, that Bobi Wine has the solutions to their problems. And he said there was a place where he could never step. But Bobi Wine went there, spent there 2 hours, and told him, Asuman, come. Asuman went there, and he was cheered in a place where he was almost stoned. Now that is Bobi Wine. Now again, also bring in the whole idea. If you are a president of the country, you cannot, in a society where there is class, spend time in a funeral, spend time in a campaign slaughtering a candidate. I thought there were election rules against this.
All right.
I just wanted to bring in one factor that people are leaving out. Now, the politics of Arua municipality is hardly influenced by any foreign person, any person outside the municipality. I can tell you that Mubarak Munyagwa was chased from speaking in a mosque.
Are you sure?
He was stopped from speaking in a mosque during the campaign process. Now, Arua municipality, unlike Kampala and other areas, is a very peculiar place. From 96 to date, actually, Wadri Kassiano is the second opposition candidate to win that municipality. Dr. Joram Majeni, NRM, Said Nasser Okuti, NRM, Ajedra, Gabriel, NRM, Akbar Godi, and Kassiano Wadri now. It's a municipality that goes beyond the political standings and looks at the individual. So individual merit plays much more than actually party affiliations. That is why when Kassiano was speaking at Mvaradri and Dr. Besigye was at Zambia Zone, if you see the pictures, one person was addressing the population of trees was bigger than the people, and one person had the Red Sea, the masses. It is not that, if you look at elections from 2001 consistently, Arua district has voted Dr. Besigye. It is not that even those people, you would see him driving through Kassiano's team and they are cheering him up and waving but shouting, this time it is Wadri. So it's about, you see, the dynamics are very different. Now, Wadri Kassiano had done a fantastic campaign. And for me, I think the unsung hero in that campaign is the Honorable Christine Abia. Absolute Iron Lady. She went through the waves against the tides. When Kassiano was taken into custody, she's the lady who held the team together. She stood tall. She had to elude arrest and make sure that they deliver the election. And so she ran a very fantastic campaign. Now, what Bobi Wine did in Arua is what they call a finishing sweep. Kassiano had done a fantastic campaign. All the odds were in his favor. The state, Dr. Tango Doi spoke from NRM and said, our threat is not Bruce Musema. The NRM's threat is Kassiano Wadri. At first, people said he's a loser in Terego. And that's the message that the FDC was preaching. He lost in Terego, he's greedy, he's fighting this young man and everything. But if you were on the ground, if any political party was on the ground and you did your research, this was a fantastic candidate. This was the candidate to beat. And then so Bobi Wine simply did what they call a finishing. Actually, I remember I interviewed Kassiano from Arua and he said, Joseph, this election is in the book, but the young people are saying as they want to see their president. Right? Said, I have won this election, but they're saying you owe us one thing, we want to see our president. And so if you think...
They call him that in Arua?
That is, I'm quoting Kassiano Wadri. He said the young people are saying they want to see their president. So I am looking for Chagulanyi. So that is how the back and forth started. And so if you think you're going to run in Arua municipality and then you will bring political bigwigs from Kampala and they're going to sway elections. And I spoke to some officials from State House. I said, President Museveni's speech today is either going to nail or save Nusrat Pero. One, over the years, there have been high-profile deaths in West Nile. And there's a feeling that, something is not right. Somebody is targeting our people. If you speak to the people. Now, the first thing the president would have done would have been actually to drive to the late Colonel Ibrahim Abiriga's home.
Being empathetic.
Very simple. And check on the family, how they are doing, how they are coping up. And drive with that family to that rally. And assure the people that we as a state are taking care of our comrades' family. That's, I think, a strategic mistake that the advisors of the NRM never did.
If I could ask you, at one moment, one of Abiriga's widows wanted to stand. What happened?
No, I don't think so. The family was divided. For example, if you saw the broadcast we did outside Golden Courts, where this gentleman was crying, you will notice Benson Ongom spoke to one of the brothers of Colonel Ibrahim Abiriga. Yeah. He was supporting an independent candidate, and he was saying, why do you steal elections? Now, for me, I got curious because I know Atima. I know he's an operative of the state.
Yeah.
I know he works for I knew that before he said it, that he works for the state. Now, when someone who works for the state, who works with the president, who works with General Otema Awany, who works with Richard Todro, is known in town that he does intelligence for the state, goes on camera and says, why are you betraying me? You tell the agencies that have been instructed to rig to stand down. That is when I told my team, guys, ours is a responsibility to society and to the truth. Back up, put on your protective gears. We have a long day. For me, that was the defining moment of that campaign. That somebody who is inside the system confirms earlier information that arrangements had been made to make sure that Wadri Kassiano is not declared winner. For me, that was the defining moment of that campaign. And then there are people who had not voted. They were watching that broadcast. NBS was the official broadcast in that town of that campaign. And people are watching an intelligence person saying, I know what you have instructed people to do. Ask them to stand down. I think that was the defining moment of that campaign.
And that leads us to a short break. We return with much more. Stay with us. Well, it's 6 minutes after 8 o'clock. You're watching the Media Roundtable here on NTNBS television. And this is the Political Command Center. All right, so let's look at the stories that sort of played out this week. And again, I want to bring you back. So let's look at the last day of the campaign. What really happened and the whole pictures that we are watching on air. Joseph, you were in the thick of it. Tell me what really happened.
You see, if you know the demography of Arua town very well, you know when you're entering town from Kampala Road, there's Arua Hill Primary School grounds. Yeah. That's where the president was. Now, the president's motorcade was at Giligili. Again, if you know that terrain very well, you will notice that you come from Arua Hill, you reach Arua Regional Referral Hospital, you turn left, you drive a few meters at prison. That is where Kassiano Wadri's final rally was.
Yeah.
So there was one route through which these people from the rally would go to town easily. and there was one route through which the presidential motorcade would drive through. Now, the rest of the things happened so fast, then later you would see pictures from my senior brother, Don, but what I know is that the president was booed as he drove through he was booed as he drove through.
Sorry to interrupt, but the timing, tell us about the timing, because there's also that the timing issue that we missed in most of the analysis. And
but you see, the place is very close by, and you see the speed at which the presidential motorcade moves. You get it? So from Arua Hill to where Kassiano Wadri's rally was is about a 3-4 minutes drive for the presidential convoy. So chances were high these people would meet. Now, chances were very high they would meet. So what I know, the rest of the things happened so fast. But what I know is that my president exited town very safely and was flown. Now, the details of the operations happened when this team drove back into town. Now, that is when the real, because if you see some of the footage, that's when my colleague Chivalizi John went on air at around 7 p.m. saying they are picking people in red and everything. Now, the detailed operation, that's how the operation moved now from the streets to Pacific Hotel. So the rest of the things happened so fast, a lot of things. But one thing I know is that at around that time, when everything happened, a lot of things can't be explained. What I
something I want to ask.
guys, I know you're all talk show hosts here, but I'm in charge here. Joseph, please proceed.
No, Solomon, there's a gap. People would want to know at what point was the presidential motorcade stoned, allegedly stoned, because there are people actually thinking the president was in the vehicle, and there are people saying the president had already flown out.
No, but the whole point is that the pictures emerged from Don. The pictures, I don't want to go into the discussion of the pictures and what's on the car. I'm no expert in, I just did mass comm. The only course unit I did in IT was basic computing.
Joseph says that is being very brilliant.
All right, Joseph. That's all I know. Yeah, that's all I learned at UCU. Basic computing. And so I don't want to discuss the details of the picture because I am no expert.
No, it's not about the picture.
Yeah, I am saying
there is a point where you say that the motorcade went back to town.
No, I'm trying to understand.
Let's give him an opportunity.
The only time we heard that the convoy was stoned was when the pictures emerged. If you ask any journalist who was on the ground. So that's why I'm saying let us leave the IT people to discuss the pictures. But I know that my president exited Arua and there was a more thorough, detailed special forces led operation. Now this operation saw a lot of people putting on red pictures. Now, later when I asked my sources in security, they say they were looking for the people who attempted. You're saying stoned, but the operation was looking for people who attempted, who made an attempt on the life of the president of this country. Now, in principle, nobody would support an attempt to stone, or even a thought to stone the convoy of the president. So this operation moves from around that area to Pacific Hotel. Now, what the real things that were witnessed were not where this happened, whether it was stoned or not stoned, but at Pacific Hotel, when these boys in plain clothes, you've seen those pictures, we have them. The boys in plain clothes are flagging off double pistols, now entered Pacific Hotel.
Yeah.
For a few minutes, our journalists were able to broadcast. The broadcast went on, it happened. As soon as they went off air, the operation moved from looking from the people who made an attempt, according to the state, on the life of the president, to journalists.
Yeah.
My colleague Julius Bakabage, thank God, he never forgot his headgear and the protective gear that we have, was hit on the head by the butt of a gun, without fear of contradiction by an officer of the Special Forces Command, the force in charge of protecting my president. What happened is the first thing they went for was the cameras. So once the cameras were down, that is when Julius was hit down, hit on the back with the butt of a gun,
My goodness.
hit on the head with the butt of a gun. Benson Ongom, our bureau chief for Northern Uganda, saw what was happening. There was no way he could help his colleague. Took off. As he was running, an officer cocked the gun at him and said, if you don't stop, I shoot you. He made a decision that he would rather be shot than go into the hands of the special forces because of the nature of the operation that was taking place. It looked a highly sensitive operation. Now, our colleague Herbert Ziwa was doing a live broadcast at that point. And then, boom, the boy disappears. We can't locate him. We make calls. I know the terrain of Arua. I call everybody I know. I talk to everybody in security I can get my hold on. We realized Herbert was not in the hands of the Uganda Police Force. And that was worrying, because if he was being held at CPS Arua, then we knew what to do. If he had committed any crime, it would have been very easy for us to walk in, to ask for police bond, to get for him legal representation. Herbert is held by the special forces that picked him out about 1 a.m. That's what we gathered. Dumped at Central Police Station in Arua at 2 a.m. Put on a truck and driven to Gulu 250 kilometers overnight and detained at Gulu Central Police Station. Now, that happened at the point when the boys were taking out the Honorable Francis Zake. And he was screaming, "You guys help me. These guys are finishing me." That's the last we had of the Honorable Francis Zake. That operation did not net the Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu. My journalistic instincts find out he jumped off the 3rd floor of a hotel and exits Pacific Hotel. Now, where I can't connect the dots is how he moves from where he went back into Pacific Hotel. So the operation continued the whole night. Now, the next morning, my colleagues want to give the county an update of where the operation happened and the state in which the hotel is. Again, Julius Bakabage, Benson Ongom, and John Chibalezi. Before they know it, a gun is pulled at them. One person tries to grab them, grabs the camera. So in that process, we lost our equipment. Our equipment was in the hands of security for about 8 hours. 8 to 10 hours, I'm trying to predict. So they tried to grab these boys. And I had told them, at no cost, do whatever you can not to be taken into custody. Do whatever you can not to go into the special forces custody, because the capabilities of these boys in an operation like that, you do not know if you will walk again. So Julius, John abandons the live unit in the hands of the guy, takes off. Benson Ongom takes off in another direction. Julius Bakabage takes off in another direction. Now Julius is pursued by a guy who cocks a pistol. They cock a pistol at Benson. He just says, "Come Ambaya." He finds the corridor. He joins the crowd and disappears. Julius is pursued by about 3 officers. They run after him, pointing a gun at him. A local person, God bless him, swings him into their house and closes the door. The soldiers pass. After about a couple of minutes, so at that point the team was we didn't know. We were now trying to call, and so when they, maybe what I needed to say, when they took Herbert Ziwa, they detained his phone. Now his phone was being used to call journalists, apparently to ask for footage. So they called the first journalist. Say, this is Herbert. But you see, if Ziwa is our friend, we work in the same corridors.
He interacts differently.
Yeah, you see, for example, when Herbert calls me, how we speak at first instance, you will just know this is certainly not Herbert Ziwa. About 3 journalists fell prey, and they had their rooms searched at 2 a.m. Now, here's my concern. I'm not saying the state should...
Did they call you?
I'm not saying the state... I am not saying the state should not do security implementations. But if there was an attempt on the life of my president, it is in the interest of the country to know what security agencies are doing to get the suspects. Now, why do journalists become first-class target when they are simply broadcasting an operation on people who had made an attempt on the life of the president? So what the next morning, Chagulanyi is not, by the time I spoke to Afande Musinguzi, he was not yet in the hands of the police. He has never been in the hands of the police. He has been in the hands of the military squarely. So after the chasing of the Bensons at Pacific Hotel, one of the people inside Chagulanyi's team tips off security that he's hiding in the ceiling of one of the rooms in the hotel. So that is where they pick him. Now later when we try to find out, he was beaten and taken into military custody, taken into a barracks. Whatever happened to him there, no one knows. We're only trying to pick hints here. He's not fine. Doctors were sent to see him in custody and things like that. And I strongly believe, I know the state has the information. Let them come out and tell us. I believe strongly that is why even Robert Chagulanyi Sentamu's wife, Babi Itungo, was not allowed to see him. Even his closest family wasn't allowed to see him. The only two people who went in are his lawyers after a long struggle.
Joseph, tell us about parading the guns and some of the evidence they found in Robert Chagulanyi's room.
That information came from Kampala. You see, in Arua, we would have. That information came from Kampala, that the operation had discovered 2 machine guns. What we picked from Arua was that the Honorable Kassiano Wadri in 2001, as a member of parliament, got a licensed pistol. And from Arua, what we gathered is that that is the pistol that was discovered in that operation. That's the information we got from Arua. But again, journalists had been chased away from the place. But let's go to the basics. What is the position of the law, Solomon, about a search if you're looking for evidence?
You need a warrant.
Absolutely. How is it conducted? Who is required to be present? Those are basic, and the state is the custodian of the constitutional principles in this country. I am not even saying special forces shouldn't do their operations. It is their mandate. They should protect my president. But when you're doing a search that will be used in court, you do the search in the presence of special forces. The only other witness is special forces. Where is that evidence going to apply? In which court? That's the question I'm asking. Was it really about looking for evidence, or they had people targeted for certain actions? And so I am saying that I think the reason why they didn't allow journalists, we were camped outside the 4th Division offices for so many hours yesterday. Nobody could move inside. Even the suspect's wife. Now I'm saying, I'm no lawyer, but I'm asking, what is the position of the law when somebody is held incommunicado for over 48 hours? Does the law allow access to his lawyers immediately? Does the law allow access to his immediate family? And so that's, I think, the question, and that's what maybe we need to be looking at.
Absolutely. The last thing from you, and then I can get the reaction from the team, is you didn't sort of feed us into the death of the driver. What happened? Sorry to take you back a day.
Truth be told, all I remember is a phone call that the driver has been taken down. That's all I remember. All I remember also is that right behind that Tundra was Chairman Norbert Mao's car. If you see that Land Cruiser behind the Tundra, is the Honorable Norbert Mao's car. Now, what happened, how he got shot, where he got shot from, I would be lying if I told you I knew. Everything happened so fast that the next thing we're seeing was a dead body in the co-driver's seat.
Well, Joseph, thanks for that detail. Sorry, I had to give you a lot of that because you're on the ground and you painted the picture very well. And Simon Kagwanjala, your reaction on what happened?
First, I pledge 100,000 to Sabiti. He's given a very good narrative, and I'll give it to you. No, it's uncool. I can't do it. Okay, off air. But thank you. Thank you very much. It's a depressing tale. At the back of my mind, I was asking, have we stooped this low? Are we back to the other era? That era, the Nile mansions, when you would be picked, taken to Nile mansions, beaten to near pulp, and you're literally a cabbage at the end of the day. What came into my mind was that picture, that ghastly picture of Honorable Zake. All wounds, bloods. You know, it's disgusting. And we've always known, with due respect, we've always known the Special Forces Command to be the most intelligent, to be the most behaved, to be the most sane until now. What is prompting, what is motivating this state of affairs? Why are we getting into what I would call a new political order that glorifies violence, a new political order that propels people to do the ugliest PR stunts? And I must say this again, Don Wanyama came off as, God knows, I wouldn't say this on air.
By the way, for the record, we invited Don Wanyama for the show, but at last moment he said he got some engagement.
He's such an amiable friend. I like Don Wanyama. I really wonder who is pushing him to become this.
His job is to speak for the president.
Yes, you can speak without Photoshop.
There's an exchange that has been going on between Don Wanyama and Andrew Kalamaji on social media.
Yeah.
And in one last response that Don Wanyama wrote, he actually said, nobody can make an argument for a certain position unless they are paid for it. So I don't know how that's
All right, thanks.
So as you conclude, mystery, the mystery that surrounds everything Arua, it's mysterious. The guy is shot dead. Then I want to speak like a Muzukuru. I don't want to annoy Jaja. You know, Jajas tend to pamper Bazukuru. So I want to speak like a spoiled Muzukuru. Jaja, things don't add up.
All right, thanks. Let me bring in Kenneth. Kenneth Lukwago here. What is your view on what happened in Arua?
I'm looking at some sort of a script, because I'm seeing some people trying to fill in the gaps, especially on the issue of the guns. Now that is an old archaic way of doing things. You know, I'm trying to imagine Bobby Wine, the advisors that surround him, that he can actually move from Kampala and go to Arua with the guns. For God's sake, to do what? And I look at all that scenario and I just remember what happened in the past with Dr. Kizza Besigye. You know, when they tried to frame, claiming that he raped somebody. There was this time in court where a witness was being coached and they had this gear on the head and they tried to cover it with what they call a kitambala, you know, and the people outside in the car were telling the witness what to say in court, you know, all those kind of things. And what disturbs me most is when I see other NRM officials trying to fill in, you know, like I saw Diono Botodong on TV actually saying that we are wondering whether those guns could not be the ones that were used to kill Abiriga. You know, when you start hearing those kind of questions, you just clearly see that there's a problem. I'm imagining a situation where, like Joseph here said, you are actually going to search somebody's room. You are going to search somebody's hotel and for evidence, not just for the sake of it. And then all of a sudden you go in this funny way. You are the only people there. There are no witnesses. The owner of the hotel actually comes out and says, look, there were no guns in my hotel. Because I know there's this process where you register as you're going into an hotel. They check to see what you came in with. And I actually think this could have happened, and if it had not happened, I think they would have picked the owner of the hotel a long time ago. So I'm just thinking there was a mess. It is a situation that got out of hand. The election was a do or die because of the losses they had already incurred, like in Bujiri, and Arua being strategic for them. So I thought they did everything possible to try to win the election, but things just got out of hand. So at the end of the day, they tried to clean up by doing things that could not add up. And Joseph was asking a question, why would they go after the journalists? I think the journalists saw, and I think the journalists were going actually to tell the truth, because the gap between what the public knows and what the state actually says happens is what the journalists could have told us, but they stopped them from doing it. I'm actually thinking that the driver of Bobby Wine could have been shot from somewhere else and then brought and just placed in the car. There's that thinking, you know, just like Joseph was saying, everyone was in disarray, everyone was running, you know. So I'm looking at a situation where they tried to conduct an operation and things were not adding up. And you know, when you're doing things and they're not adding up, there are always gaps for people to actually look through and actually think what you're trying to do was not actually being done in the right way. So I'm looking at a situation where they are fabricating some sort of evidence to be able to pin Kyagulanyi. You know, you beat up somebody, really, when you arrest somebody, you beat them to that extent. The lawyers actually telling us that, look, the guy cannot stand, the guy cannot walk, the guy cannot talk, his face is swollen, he cannot see. You know, it's a terrible situation, and I think we have not learned anything from our past history.
All right, and I know, Samson, you're burning, but let me just see, first of all, engage Mildred Aise. You've heard it from Joseph. What exactly happened there? Give us your general view of what happened and the implications.
It's an interesting one, if I would say. I was listening to Joseph and I was just saying I can give my minutes all through because the viewers out there need to know what happened. And the first point of break was the security organs trying to deter journalists from listening into what would happen. Because even we in the studio, even the viewers wherever they were, their dependence was on what's the next live update on NBS TV. What are they going to say? What exactly is going on? But giving a general perspective, I want to start off with a seemingly person who is more forgotten, Yassin. Yassin is now buried, and you know, being the smaller wig, if I would say so, in this whole thing, he might be forgotten. But with evidence gathering, one, if there was a scuffle, like in the president's letter he does allege, if there was a scuffle, I want to believe that the presidential convoy has intelligence, not only intelligence in terms of guns and all that, they have a journalistic crew that could be able to move with the president. How come? Yes, we never got to see this happening. I want to believe that the pathological report, the post-mortem report of Yassin, can easily show how much force the bullet used to penetrate him. Because that could easily be able to tell whether the bullet was just a stray or it was actually a targeted bullet. Let's start off with the security guys who were around.
Bullet?
Two or whatever, whichever number of bullets it is. And here's the other question. You know which people were sent to the field in that particular place. You know the security guys. You know how many rounds of ammunition they have. There will have to be fingerprints on guns, and you will know I gave so and so this rounds of ammunition, and they're missing out this and this. How many bullets were fired into the space to be able to disperse the crowds? Those are some of the issues that need to be paid attention to, and I clearly know we can easily get to know who killed Yassin if we are going to focus on paying attention. If the state is going to focus more on the evidence and gather it, we can get to know who that is. Time will be able to tell whether we'll know the person or not. Let's go now to Honorable Kyagulanyi.
Before you get to Yassin, leaving Yassin,
yeah.
It's just disturbing how a stray bullet goes and hits someone in Robert Kyagulanyi's car.
Exactly, that's the whole point of discussion. What sort of scuffle ensued that the journalists can't even remember? Yeah, that sort of scuffle that ensued that the journalists cannot even remember, and the next we know are pictures going on. Honorable Kyagulanyi himself posted and said, well, they thought they had shot me, and journalists are just receiving the information. That is where the problem is, because a journalist is the ears and eyes on the ground for the people to be able to tell the truth. Why do you have to go an extra mile, even in looking for Honorable Sentamo, go an extra mile of searching for footage? You use a journalist's phone to call to search for footage. Why do you want to take the footage? All I did with the footage was to capture what's happening and report a story. Why is the footage being targeted? And like Kenneth said, that's what I was thinking about. I don't want to think Pacific Hotel is a lowly hotel. I think it's one of the very classy hotels in Arua. They should have CCTV cameras that could capture CCTV footage on who is entering. You declare what is what you're entering with, you will go through a metal detector that can be able to detect whatever it is, unless we're going to say there was connivance with the security at Pacific, that Honorable Kyagulanyi Ssentamu could be able to move in with a gun. That evidence will be able to tell, and the investigations will be able to tell at that point in time as well. Because a gun, even a gun, if you say you found a gun in someone's car, there are fingerprints to that. All that forensic information, I know.
Just to come in, if you're in custody of the military for over 48 hours, don't bring in the question of fingerprints, because that can be arranged.
Yeah, it can be arranged. Yes, I totally agree.
Yes.
But those are some of the issues that will have to come out in the courts of law, because courts of law is not about hearsay. It's going to be evidence-based. And this is evidence that is beyond reasonable doubt. We hope that we will have this kind of evidence. But let me just wind up with coming to Bobi Wine being arraigned into the courts of law.
A second, that will come after. But I just wanted to,
Okay.
it's coming after in our last segment. But I just wanted to find out, has the state even interested itself in filing for murder of Yasin?
No.
The president, if you saw the letter, says in the process, the first letter, in the process, one of the attackers was shot dead.
Yeah.
So
So
the
it's
state,
treated as
the
a-
One of
state,
the attackers.
Yes.
yes, the state in its before investigations are done and everything has already declared him an aggressor on the president of the republic of this country. And so what we can say for Yasin is, may his soul rest in peace.
The way
Samson,
But also beyond the guns, there were other pieces of evidence that were gathered,
Bullets.
including
Rounds of
15
ammunition.
mobile phones. It will be very interesting to know whose SIM cards and these mobile phones.
Because we registered.
That's an interesting
You know, because if they say that the Honorable Kyagulanyi had 15 phones,
His phone is in the hand of the state. His known phone
So-
is in the hands of the state.
it would be very important, like Joseph here said, you got to do a search, and you do it in a clumsy way. You create all these gaps. You know, how do we know that?
These phones were there. All right, let me just bring in Samson Kasumba to give his general views on what happened.
It's a very disturbing one, Solomon, because my dad's older brother, one of my dad's older brother, disappeared at the hands of the state. Amin was president at the time. He's never been seen. My mom's older brother disappeared at the hands of the state. Obote was president. He's never been seen. I have another uncle who was mismanaged, again by the state. I will keep, who was president. He later died. The family thinks the state's injuries to him were responsible. So it's a very difficult one for me, this, because I just don't want actions that remind me of the wounds I have suffered and we have suffered as the family because of mismanagement by states. Many members of my family have always had hopes, and some still work and trust politics. I don't. So these things bring bitter wounds within members of my family over state-caused losses to a family, and they're not good. I feel for Don Nabasa, who I hold in high respect, because in his tenure he has parliament. He has this. Now, I have to say, without fear of contradiction, that I have, through my very short stay in journalism, had very good cooperation from SFC officers. And for some reason, every time I meet them, they never call me Kasumba, they never call me Samson, they call me Mr. Kasumba. So there is a lot of respect, I don't know why, that I enjoy from SFC officers because of the very nature of what I do. I get very close. And most recently, during the broadcast of the arrival of the Prime Minister of India, I mean, if you're going to get very close to the plane, you get very close to these people. And I mean, the guy who was playing ADC for the Indian Prime Minister, I think there's a picture of mine on Twitter. He stands literally at attention. He's a senior officer of the UPDF to greet me. Who am I? So that's a relationship I have with these people. Very professional people. This is what I know of SFC. So then, as I know that SFC that I experience on close quarters, I have a problem with the SFC I see in Parliament, and then this SFC I'm hearing coming out of Arua. So which SFC are we talking about here?
It's about power.
Looks as if there are two SFCs, and I don't understand the one.
One of them.
This, and it's clear SFC. The one here, the one in Parliament, and the professional men and women I see every day. Now, I think that SFC, Asia Kifanyi, if that's what they stand for, I think Asia Kifanyi should be about real enemies, that everybody knows that they are enemies. But if Asia Kifanyi is going to be about journalists, is it now a crime for Kasumba or Sabiti or Herbert Ziwa or anyone to hold a microphone and a live camera and just tell the public what is happening? Is that a crime?
We'll be answering that.
Is that where we are?
We'll be answering that, Samson.
But Solomon,
We're going for a break, but when we return, we take you inside the court martial and how Bobi Wine is. We'll be discussing that and more. Stay with us.
Kyadondo East Member of Parliament Robert Kyagulanyi has been charged with unlawful possession of firearms and ammunition. According to the charge sheet, Kyagulanyi, also known as Bobi Wine, was on 14th of August found with an SMG gun, serial number 564801247.
Then he was also said to be in unlawful possession of ammunitions, and that he was in possession of 35 live ammunitions of a caliber of 7.26 blah blah blah, equipment ordinarily being a monopoly of the defense forces. So there is no treason, okay? We thought that since they had been arrested under similar circumstances, they would be charged with similar offenses. But whereas the other group was charged with the treason, for him it is unlawful possession of firearms and ammunition, okay?
Appearing before the General Court Martial in Gulu, Kyagulanyi, according to his lawyers Asuman Basalirwa and Busiro Member of Parliament Meda Rubega Segona, the only two who were allowed into the court, said he looked very weak.
But the face is swollen, the legs cannot support themselves. That is the situation.
There is no doubt that Honorable Bobi Wine was not in control of his mental faculty because of the excessive torture that he faced. We were surprised that even when he was in solitary confinement, he was still handcuffed. And we were raising it with our colleague. How do you handcuff a person who is already in solitary confinement in some secluded house?
In his condition.
In his condition, okay?
Or I have lost the words of telling people, remain cool. That's not my duty. I would not allow the state to inflame the air, then tell me, calm down the people. I reject that.
The court session did not last long.
Well, that's one of the stories that we filed yesterday. Asuman, the lawyers, that is Medad Segona and Asuman Basalirwa, who are representing Robert Kyagulanyi in the court martial, and they said only 2 civilians were allowed in that court. Not even the family was given access to see their loved one, Bobi Wine. So let me bring it back to the media round table here. It is very clear from the narrative of the lawyers that Bobi Wine is in bad state. That basically means that he was beaten, battered and broken, and he was out of his mental faculty. Joseph.
That information first came from our sources in intelligence, that at some point doctors were dispatched by the military to go and attend to him because they were worried about his health. And then so I first heard that from people in the military, and then now hearing it from the lawyers. I haven't been able to see, a first-hand account of how he's doing. But remember, he was picked after the journalists had been chased away. Remember, there was an operation that morning that checked every car exiting Arua town before they picked him. And so about his state, I think the state only knows. But I wanted to say this. In principle, nobody is immune to the processes of the law. Let's make that clear. Whether it is Honorable Robert Chagulanyi or Honorable Kassiano Wadri or Honorable Paul Muiru, if you have committed an offense in principle, you have to face the law. But Solomon, let's refresh our minds. Do you remember that famous statement that my husband is going to be convicted by a kangaroo court? Do you guys remember that statement? Mm-hmm. Do you remember the circumstances under which the Honorable Winnie Byanyima said my husband is going to be convicted by a kangaroo court? And the arguments? Do you remember the legal arguments back and forth that eventually transferred the charges from court-martial for Dr. Besigye to the civilian courts? I thought those things set precedents in law. Dr. Besigye was charged in a military court after he retired. There was a protracted legal battle. The case was moved to the civilian court. Years later, Robert Chagulanyi Sentamu is taken back to the court-martial. Now, my argument is that the state is a custodian of our constitutional bedrocks.
Yeah.
Who should set the pace? Who sets the example? Now, let's even assume that Chagulanyi organized the stoning. Let's give it to the state for argument's sake that he did that. His wife stood with us and with other journalists and other people for hours, no access. His brothers for hours, no access. The team that was commissioned by the Speaker of Parliament, a constitutional institution in this country, no access. Journalists, because remember, this is a person who is accused of attempting to kill the President of the Republic. Journalists, no access. So the court, I think, happened in the presence of General Guti, Chagulanyi, Basalirwa, Segona, and the state prosecutor. Now, is that the kind of judicial system that this country wants? I am saying give it to them that he has done whatever they have done. Why do you try him in sort of a confinement? The question I'm actually asking is, why is it very difficult for the state to produce the Honorables Francis Zake and Robert Chagulanyi Sentamu to the public? I want to give you a picture, a painful picture I saw in court in Gulu. They read the charge sheet and the charges. It was discovered about 4 of the people on the charge sheet were not in court, were missing. Thank God the magistrate, Francis Matenga, says court will only proceed if all the suspects are here. They bring him in a Sarah night. The woman is bleeding through her private parts in court. They bring through the Honorable Kassiano Wadri's bodyguard. The gentleman cannot walk. They bring through another lady. For her to be put down, she screams loud in court. The state, the custodian of the constitutional framework of this country, had left them in the holding cell instead of bringing them to court. What do you want me as a journalist who has a responsibility to society and to the truth to say about the conduct of the state machinery in this trial? Do you want me, who went to journalism school, and actually my oath is to be the eyes and ears of society, to say that these suspects are fine? Are you going to accuse me of being biased when I saw a woman bleed in court and I saw a woman scream? What do you want the nation to say? I have more questions and less answers in this thing. I am saying, let us even give it to them that these guys made an attempt on the life of the president, and they're supposed to go through the due process. But how are you going to try a woman who is bleeding through her private parts? And how are you going to try a man who can't stand? What happened to him? He was a bodyguard. How did he transform from being a bodyguard to a point where he can't stand? How did that woman transform from the state in which she was campaigning for her candidate into that state?
All right, let me bring in, that's my same question. I mean, if we don't talk about these things, then no one will, because you see people have been arrested, and they come and they're beaten.
And Solomon, let's go back to the people who were taken by the state. Norman Tumuhimbise he wears glasses. He was a young man with very fine vision, very strong physically. He now wears glasses. No man cannot sit without back support in the hands of the state. The Honorable Francis Zake had to fly to the US after that operation of Parliament. to receive treatment. The Honorable Betty Namboze has never been the same again. In the hands of the same people. Why are we setting precedent? This government went to the bush to fight against certain practices. If the Honorable Zake has committed an offense, how hard is it for Uganda police, let's not even go to special forces, to pick Honorable Zake, arraign him in court, remand him, and keep him there? These things bother me.
All right, let me bring in, they bother all of us.
They do.
They really do bother all of us. But let me bring in Kenneth, the court martial. They're charging someone who doesn't even understand what he's saying.
You see, it's really very disturbing, and to understand the strategy and perhaps the intention, you need to go back to Parliament and see the manner in which General Moses Ali communicated the decision, and how the House reacted. You know, when the General Moses Ali came out to say that Honorable Kyagulanyi was found with the guns, there was silence in the House, and then all of a sudden, laughter. It's laughable, you know.
But he also kept saying,
This is a government, and you must be careful.
he was not owning
He
it.
was not only sort of issuing a warning all the same, because I think at the back of their mind they knew that what they were going to tell the nation was not likely to be acceptable. But let's go to the court martial. So I spoke to Honorable Basalirwa as they gathered to go into the 4th division. First of all, they all entered. There were 8 lawyers inside the barracks. When the chairman of the General Court Martial was arriving, had just arrived, an order came, and they were told to leave. The Basalwa told me they tried to resist, and then they were surrounded by about 30 armed men, and all of a sudden they were forced to leave. And then later they allowed only 2 people to go in. Now, like Joseph here said, when somebody is arrested, they have certain rights that cannot be taken away from them. They're entitled to a doctor if they're in bad shape. Their immediate families must be able to see them, and their lawyers must be able to see them, so that whatever you're processing, they get to know about it. But the injuries these people sustained, including the women that Joseph was talking about, I think the injuries happened beyond Arua. There was one lady, I would not reveal her name, who was able to call me, and instead they were asking me whether I had any information from my journalistic connections about where Kyagulanyi could have been taken. And at that point, they were telling me that the information they had that Kyagulanyi had been driven to Moyo district. So she still had her phones while in the cells in Arua, and she could talk clearly. Even the Honorable Kassiano Wadri still had his phones in the cells in Arua, and he would freely talk. But then all of a sudden, the following day, that's when I get to see that actually some of these women were actually beaten. So I'm thinking the beating could have occurred between Arua and Gulu, where they were taken. But I'm just wondering, why do you beat somebody to that extent, and then you arraign them in court, and then you expect them to enter plea, for instance?
No, but you see, you first keep them down.
Okay.
You bring the ones who can stand. You keep the injured down until the magistrate says, I want everybody on the charge sheet.
Exactly.
Why you have brought people to court? Why do you first keep them down? Why don't you want the country to see the state in which they are?
But why do you even beat them to that extent?
On Kyagulanyi's state, Basalirwa told me that the guy could not walk. He was supported. He could not sit. The only thing he could do is lie down. The guy could not talk. He could not see. And the chairman of the General Court Martial, General Guti, insisted, because the Basalirwa raised some objections. One, they said he should not enter plea because of his state of health. Then General Guti said if he doesn't, I will even have him charged for contempt of court.
But how do you end? Okay.
Then the charges were read, and the plea was entered on his behalf of not guilty. So you're charging somebody who does not understand even what is going on. Secondly, they also said if you are going to incarcerate this guy, let him be taken to a civilian facility. The guys insisted that he has to be taken to a military detention, but they said they will allow anyone who wants to see him to do so. So I'm waiting to see whether actually that will happen.
The leader of opposition is
but
planning to visit him
generally speaking, the history of the General Court Martial in Uganda, as far as political actors is concerned, is clearly known. They take you there because they want to keep you out of circulation.
But with the rules of natural justice,
they take you there because they want to weaken your resolve. They take you there because they want sort of to portray this image that you're a bad person. Because imagine when the young people that believe in Kyagulanyi, like Joseph Sabiti said, the people in Arua were saying, we want to see our president. When they start hearing that you had guns, and you know the state has a capacity to frame you, they can even claim that the same guns were used to kill very many other people. So it's a situation that it's an ugly situation that I think we should not actually be involving in as a country. And I think if we are a democracy that the people in government want us to believe, then we should actually be playing by the books. Why do things that are taking us back?
Samson, we have 5 minutes to get out of, but let me give you an opportunity.
I think for the young people out there, the narration of the incidents in Arua and the ability to keep them to memory and produce them in a manner as if one is watching a live movie by Joseph Sabiti is the reason why some of us, even at an old age, came into journalism. But I think let's make no mistake, where we are, if you're not willing to make sacrifices, including torture, don't get into journalism, because it's going to get tough. It's going to get really, really tough. As government manages this, it's going to get tough. There are going to be real threats on journalism because there's a situation to manage. So if you want, you are one faint of heart. This is not the point to be doing journalism, because to be able to do proper journalism right now will take guts.
All right, let me bring in Mildred to Haise. Mildred, the torture of people arrested, tortured, and incarcerated, and then brought before court. These have been happening. My senior colleague knows about the Nile,
Nile Mansion.
The Nile Mansion. And we're seeing the same replica of
the state of blood
issues coming back. Don't we, as the fourth estate, have to expose some of these things to sort of bring change?
Is it even an exposure? It's telling the truth. Like Joseph was asking, what's very hard about arresting someone, arraigning them before court? They're charged, they are convicted and taken to wherever you have to be taking them, Luzira or wherever you have to be holding them, serve their sentence. If they're to come out, they come out. If they're not to come out, I think that's better. You always talk about natural justice. Why would you, if you think everything is going on right? We've seen suspects, we've seen the likes of ADF rebels being, arraigned before court. Journalists even cover the arrival, even in as much as some courts do not allow, coverage within the courts. But you are allowed to see the suspects being arraigned before court. But here you are, you don't even want a suspect to be seen. You don't even want the suspect to be seen by the closest of relatives, not even a select committee of parliament. Because this is an issue, this is a member of parliament, number one. Secondly, this is an issue that is being discussed on the floor of parliament. Parliamentarians represent Ugandans. Ugandans are asking questions, and you cannot even provide the list of this. You, as a head of a court, decide to take on a person in a state that they cannot even be able to recognize what's going on. Decide and agree to take plea for that person on their behalf. I would think naturally, even before we bring in the laws and everything, that if you see someone in that particular state, ask them to be taken to hospital. Ask them to be treated. Get in their right state of mind. Bring them back to court. It is not like someone is asking him to be taken back to his home. He's still being held. But, well, it's depressing, and the images that come through. The last time we talked about images of people who were arrested after Kawesi, someone said on air while looking at live pictures, they said those were edited pictures. I will end with one statement. This is a fundamental change, not a mere change of guards. I hope I hope this can be filled.
Let me just, Simon, let me just say one statement. Through our journalism, which is done with sources internationally, because this came off the stoning of the president's vehicle, what if we find out that that vehicle that was stoned has a camera?
And we don't have any footage.
Let me go to Simon. Let me go back to Simon Kagwanja. I don't want us to go back to Arua, but just coming back to Simon Kagwanja, this whole everything that is going on feeds into something.
Yeah, and it is very simple. In Uganda, the trend has always been that we think after acting. We first act, then think out something, try to put pieces together. We goof, we try to mend. You see government propagandists are very busy on the keyboards fighting. There's something that I found very interesting. It comes from OO. It's a tweet from OO. He says, he wrote yesterday, I can confirm that suspect at Bobi Wine, Robert Kyagulanyi, has arrived in Machindi and lodged in the same wing with Abdallah Chitata of Boda Boda 2010. That is the level of insensitivity that defines the country called Uganda. But while we look at these harrowing stories and we think they are just events and Ugandans will just forget, Ugandans will move on, the annals of history are going to judge whoever is doing this. Even their families, next generations will be told that your father killed people, your father did this, your father did this. I'm not cursing, but like fate, karma always comes back, and it serves a very good meal.
Well, let me just say my last word today, and this is from my heart. The things that are happening, I made a comment on Twitter that I said that the notion that democracy, that the tree of democracy should be watered by blood can't stand anymore. That we've come a long way and we cannot afford to look back. Simon has told us about the Nile Martians. I wasn't there, but I know people disappeared, people died. And that's one of the things that the president said brought him to power, to stop these killings and stop these tortures. The NRA fought. Some of our parents contributed to that fight and to bring this peace back to this nation. It is very worrying that the same things that the NRA fought against are beginning to manifest again. So, I just think that something needs to change. My name is Solomon Seranja. Thanks for being part of the Media Roundtable. Have a good day.